Okay, so far we talked about the consumption schedule, and remember that our full model is, GDP is equal to C plus I plus is equal to C plus I plus G plus XN, right? Net export. So consumption plus investment plus government spending plus net export. So what we're going to do now is we're going to focus on investment, okay? And we're going to add the investment schedule to the consumption schedule, okay? But in order to do that, we really need to understand what investment is all about and how the investment schedule looks like and why it looks the way it is and what affects it, okay? So let's get to the basics of what investment is all about even. Okay, so there's an investment rule, but really let's ask ourselves, okay, what is investment? Well, investment is basically buying, businesses buying capital or machinery, right? And so a business will never buy a machine if they think they're not going to make a profit on it, right? And a business basically has a decision to make. They have some money, and they have to decide, am I going to use the money to buy a machine in order to produce more of my product, or am I just going to put the money in the bank and collect interest on it? Okay? Or if they don't have the money, they have to decide, do I borrow money from the bank and pay interest on it, or do I just not borrow money at all and not buy the machine? Because after all, if they were to borrow money from the bank, it would be in order to buy the machine. Okay, so I don't want to complicate it too much, but basically, if they decide to buy the machine, it's because they think that the rate of return on the machine will be greater than the interest rate that they could collect from putting their money in the bank. So really what we're looking here is at marginal analysis. You guys didn't think we'd get back to that, but we are. And so marginal analysis, remember, we have marginal benefit and we have marginal cost. When you buy a machine, you will have a certain additional benefit from buying that machine. That will be considered your expected rate of return. But if you buy the machine with a whole bunch of money, what you forgo is the interest rate that you could collect from putting that money in the bank. And that is your marginal cost, your opportunity cost, okay? The cost that you incur for buying that machine, okay? The opportunity cost because you could have put that money in the bank. So the interest, the real interest rate is your opportunity cost. And remember, the difference between real interest rate and nominal interest rate is that real interest rate takes into account inflation. So real interest rate is nominal interest rate minus inflation. So we're taking into account price level adjustments here, which is important to think of. Okay, so how do I compute the expected rate of return? Well, let's say that I buy a machine that costs me $1,000. But I believe that by buying this machine, I can increase my total revenue by $1,100. So this was my cost, and this is the increase in total revenue. Well, my expected rate of return, or R, actually, let's do R like that. My expected rate of return is going to be computed this way. TR minus the cost divided by the cost of the investment. So my expected rate of return in this case is 1100 minus 1000, okay, in parentheses, divided by 1000, which is 0.1 or 10%. So my rate of return here is 10%, which is not bad at all. Okay, it means that if I buy this machine will basically increase the value of my business, basically increase the value of my investment by 10%. Okay, I put in $1,000, I get 1,100. That's an increase of 10%. That's not bad. Okay. Now, of course, if the real interest rate that I could get from putting my money in the bank was higher, let's say it was 15%, then I should never have bought the machine in the first place. What I should have done is just put my money in the bank and collect 15% on it. Put the $1,000 in the bank. Put in bank. The reason for that is because I'll get more. I'll end up getting, you know, that much money, 1,150, right? Instead of just 1,100. But the reality is that real interest rates are never that high, okay, especially on money that you put in the bank. They might charge you this much to borrow money, but they're not going to give you that much when you put your money in the bank. Real interest rates are usually, you know, really nice ones might be like at 5% or 6%. So clearly in this case, you should buy the machine and invest, right? So as long as the expected rate of return, so what is the investment rule? Let's put it up here. The investment rule is that if expected rate of return is greater than real interest rate, then invest. If not, you should not invest. So this leads us to a really important graph called the investment demand curve. Okay. On the y-axis, you're going to have real interest rate. Okay, real I stands for real interest rate. On the x-axis, you're going to have the amount of investment. And this will be, you know, in the US, it's going to be in certainly the hundreds of billions of dollars, if not trillions. Okay, but basically in dollars, right? So the real interest rate is a percent, right, in percentage terms, and investments in dollars. Now, because the bigger the interest rate is going to be, the more businesses will want to put their money in banks and not buy machinery, because it's easier to make money just by putting the money in the bank. But the lower the interest rate is, the more businesses will not want to save their money in the bank. Again, the reason it's downward sloping is because if the real interest rate is very low, it's much easier to find expected rates of return that are higher. For example, if it's 1%, okay, it's very easy for firms to find machinery they can buy and get an expected rate of return that is higher than 1%, and therefore businesses will end up buying many machines. Right? That's why you're seeing that at 1% investment in machinery is very high. Okay, and again, what I mean by investment is not financial investment in bank. I mean buying machinery. Okay, if the interest rate is very high, firms, companies will not want to invest in machines. They will want to put their money in banks because it's hard to get an 8% rate of return. Usually you get a rate of return of maybe 5 or 6. And so if you have an 8% real interest rate that you could get from a bank, if you were to put your money in a bank and save it there, you're much more likely to just put your money in the bank and not invest in machinery. And that's why you're seeing a very low amount of investment at a real interest rate of 8%.